Have you ever stopped to wonder how the really powerful jobs in public service get filled? It's not always as simple as you might think. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on that whole process by digging into one very specific, very important rulebook.
So let's just get right to it with a big question. Who actually picks a state's most powerful police officer? We're talking about the Director General of Police, the DGP. Is it, a purely political decision? Is it all about who's been on the force the longest? Or is there something else going on entirely?
Well, when it comes to the state of Telangana, there's actually no guesswork involved. The answer is right there, spelled out in black and white. It's all laid out in a law called the Telangana Police Act of 2018. And that's exactly what we're looking at today. This document is our guide, and it's got all the answers. All right, so here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at what this act actually is, what the checklist for picking the top cop looks like, how long they get to stay in the job, the specific reasons they could be removed, and finally, we'll zoom out and talk about why a law like this is so important in the first place.
Okay, so first things first. Before we jump into the really juicy stuff, the who and the how, we've got to understand the what. So what exactly is this Telangana Police Act?
The act itself is super clear about its purpose. This quote is pulled right from the law, and it basically says its whole reason for being is to set up a formal, official way to pick the head of the entire police force. It's all about taking the guesswork out and putting a real system in place. And the law gets really specific with its language, which is super important. For instance, when it talks about a police officer, it's not just talking about any officer. It makes a point to include members of the Indian Police Service, the IPS, who are working in the state. Now, this might sound like a small detail, but trust me, it's absolutely crucial for what we're about to get into.
All right, now we're getting to the real heart of it. How does the government actually pick the DGP? Well, the law doesn't just leave it up to chance or a gut feeling. Nope, it lays out some very specific rules.
It pretty much boils down to a 4-point checklist. First off, the person has to already be a high-ranking IPS officer. That's a must. Second, their seniority, how long they've served, is a big factor. Third, their track record has to be, and I'm quoting the law here, very good. And finally, they've got to have the skills and knowledge to actually lead the entire police force. It's a pretty high bar.
Okay, so let's say an officer ticks all those boxes and gets the job. The next logical question is, right, how long do they get to keep it? Is it a job for life, or can they be swapped out whenever the political winds change? Well, the Act is crystal clear on this one. It guarantees a minimum term of 2 years, and this is a really big deal. It shows that the whole point of the law is to create some stability, right? To protect the top cop from short-term political pressure so they can actually focus on long-term plans for the force.
But, and this is a big but, that 2-year term isn't some kind of unbreakable guarantee. The law is smart. It also builds in a way to hold the DGP accountable. There are a few very specific situations where they can be removed before those 2 years are up.
So, is the job really guaranteed for 2 years no matter what? The short answer is no, not quite. The Act has what you could call a safety valve, a list of very clear reasons that can end that term early. Let's take a look at what those are. Yeah, these reasons are pretty serious and very specific. We're talking about things like being convicted of a crime or corruption, or facing major disciplinary action like being fired. It can also be for health reasons, like if they become physically or mentally unable to do the job. Of course, they can also be moved to another job if they agree to it. And then there's this last one, other administrative grounds, which is a bit of a catch-all for things like big government reorganizations.
So we've gone through the what, the how, and the how long. But now let's kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture here. Why go to all the trouble of passing an entire law for just one single job? Why does any of this really matter?
The answer is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. A law like this completely changes the game. It gets rid of all the vagueness and replaces it with clarity. It creates a process that's transparent and consistent. So instead of important decisions happening behind closed doors, you have a public, predictable set of rules that everyone has to play by. At its core, it's about building trust and integrity in the system.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. We've seen the process, we've seen the rules, but does having a really solid, well-defined process on paper automatically mean you'll get the best possible leader in the real world? It's something to really chew on when you think about where laws and leadership meet. Thanks for digging into this with us today.